So I'm going to read a quote to you from one of my favorite books called The Happiness Hypothesis by John Haidt. People need adversity, setbacks, and perhaps even trauma to reach the highest level of strength, fulfillment, and personal development. This quote really works with what we're going to talk about today, and what we're going to talk about is challenge point framework. This is from a paper that Tim Lee and I published several years ago. You may have seen the introduction video that we did on challenge point. I'm going to explain or remind you of what challenge point is, but the overview is if you practice the way that challenge point suggests for you to practice, you'll learn 3 or 4 times faster than normal, and it will be stress resistant, which means that you're going to be able to perform better during actual competition or when you really need to perform. Now today, we're going to talk about this basic idea specifically around motor skills or physical skills, and more specifically around golf. So I'm going to walk you through a study that we did several years ago, and then we'll talk about how you can actually apply this to your learning, not specifically golf, although you could use that, but also music or any other physical skill that you want to learn. So in this particular situation, we had people who were putting to 3 different targets A, B, and C, as you see on this graph. And the order in which people putted to the different targets changed. So in the blocked group, they putted to A, then B, 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 C, 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 C. That's the way most people actually practice. They'll drop a bunch of golf balls, they'll putt them over and over and over again to the same hole. The random group, they putted A, C, B, C, B, A, and so forth. It was sort of random, and they switched the targets every single time. So one of the things that's interesting is if you look at the literature, the motor learning literature on this, sometimes you'll see the blocked group actually learns more, and sometimes you'll see the random group learns more, and we're going to explain why that happens and what you need to do about it. Okay, so what you see on this graph, y-axis, the vertical axis, is accuracy score. So how accurate are they? How close did they get to the hole with this? So the higher the score, the better. And we had a pre-test where we looked at all of the groups, and of course the experienced group did better than the novice group because they're experienced. And then we showed what happened during practice. And the last thing that we're going to show, which you can't see on the graph right now, is how they did later. So we brought them back the next day and see how much they had retained or how much they had learned. What you see is that in both cases, the blocked group did better than the random group did during practice. So for experienced people, the blocked group did better. They had better accuracy scores. For inexperienced people, the novice, the blocked group did better than the random group. And the reason is simple. Blocked is easier. Putting to the same target over and over again is easier than putting to different targets every single time. But we're not really concerned with how people were doing during practice, because what we want is for them to reach an optimal challenge point. We don't know where that was. We know what was easier or harder, but we don't know where the optimal challenge point was. So we brought them back the next day to see how they're doing. And when we look at the novice group, we see that the novice group not only performed better during practice under blocked over and over again to the same target, but they also learned more. So that was seemed to be a more optimal challenge point for them. Random practice was probably too hard for them because they didn't do as well during practice and they didn't learn as much. So it was over optimal. Then if we look at the experienced group, it was the exact opposite. Even though the blocked group did better during practice, it was actually the random group that learned more. And the reason was because random practice for experienced people is more optimal. That's more their optimal challenge point. The blocked was too easy for them. So what does this mean for you? This means that based on your level, your ability, you should make the practice harder or harder for yourself, or easier if you're novice, if you're just starting out with whatever it is that you're trying to learn. To be even more specific, if you can have a success rate around 65 to 70%, that's probably your optimal challenge point. You're going to fail 30-35% of the time, but that's exactly the amount of challenge that you should have to be able to optimize your long-term learning. I'm going to tell you one quick thing about this. Don't worry about those times that you're failing, because those are important trials for you to be able to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's exactly what's going to help you learn. Do you want to look good now or be great later? That's really the question that you need to ask yourself. Hope that this helps.